Hi, my name is Peter, and welcome to the workshop here at Sunny Beaches. This is a hobby workshop. I am not a professional woodworker or a professional anything else anymore, having recently retired. As an amateur woodworker, I need help to get my projects to come out decently. And by help, I mean I depend on my tools to compensate for my general lack of woodworking skills. And the primary tool I depend on is this one. This is a European-style 5-function woodworking machine. I purchased this from the MiniMax company in the fall of 2003, about 11 years ago. At that time, the machine cost me about $8,000, and having it shipped from Texas costs another $500. So it was a considerable investment, but one that I've never regretted. I should point out before we get too far along that I do not work for MiniMax. Other than the fact that I own this machine and the bandsaw behind me, I have no relationship with the company, and in fact I haven't purchased anything from them for at least 8 years. This is the MiniMax CU300. The CU stands for combination unit. The 300 is something we'll get to in a bit. Back in 2003, MiniMax offered 2 versions of this. There was the Classic and the Smart. This is a Classic. The major difference between the two is that on the Classic, there's only one on switch here at the front. There are off switches at 2 other workstations, but to turn it on, you need to come here. On the Smart, there are on and off switches at all 3 locations. So it saves you a couple of steps. Today, the MiniMax website only shows a Classic. They call it a Classic, and looking at the pictures, it appears to be like this one in having only the single on switch. It looks like some other things have changed a little bit, but nothing major. The basic functionality doesn't seem to have changed in the intervening years. As I said, this is a European-style machine. They are apparently very popular in Europe with both professional and amateur woodworkers. This is actually manufactured in Italy by a company called SCM Group. MiniMax is apparently a sub-brand used in the United States and I think a few other English-speaking countries. The manufacturer has made some allowances for American preferences, tastes, habits. For instance, rulers on the machine are calibrated in inches, as well as metric measurements. And the machine will accept a dado blade, thankfully. Apparently dado blades are not commonly used in Europe, but we Americans need our dado blades, so we've been accommodated. But even so, there are things about the machine that will seem a little bit foreign, I think, to most American woodworkers, at least at first. Okay, so I said there were 5 functions. What are they? Well, before we start, I want to say that I do plan on doing additional videos that will go into these functions in much more detail. So we're going to skim over these pretty quickly for this introduction. So first there is the table saw. The table saw will accept a blade up to 12 inches in diameter. There's also a splitter that comes up and down with the blade. There's a scoring blade that can be raised and lowered independently. A scoring blade is used to reduce the likelihood of tear out or chipping. It would be primarily used with sheet goods. The table saw functions are powered by a dedicated 4.8 horsepower electric motor. Next we have the shaper, which is under this circular cover here. A shaper is kind of a big industrial grade router table. The shaper is also powered by a 4.8 horsepower dedicated motor. Over here to my right on top is the jointer. MiniMax calls this a 12-inch jointer. In fact, it's a 300 millimeter jointer. That's where the 300 and CU300 comes from. 300 millimeters is actually just a little over 11 3/4 inches. Underneath the jointer is the planer. These two tables rotate up out of the way when you're going to use the planer. The planer shares the same cutter head with the jointer, so it also shares the same 300 millimeter capacity. The fifth and final function is the horizontal mortiser. At the end of the cutter head for the jointer and planer is a chuck that can accept a bit, and there's this sliding table. It can be raised and lowered with a hand crank, and there are levers that allow the table to be moved left and right and in and out to form the mortise. So the jointer, planer, and horizontal mortiser share a third 4.8 horsepower electric motor. I should point out that all of these woodworking functions have sawdust ports associated with them for connection to a sawdust collection system. You can see some of the ductwork for my system behind me. And really for a machine like this, you need some sort of dust collection. It's really not optional. Also, a machine of this capability will not run on 110 volts. You need a dedicated 220 volt circuit for it. Another major feature of this machine is the slider. MiniMax refers to this as a 5.5 foot slider. The actual travel is a little over 6'4", but 5.5 feet is probably the usable capacity. MiniMax also offers an 8.5 foot slider. The slider is most commonly used in conjunction with a crosscut fence. So the fence is mounted so that it's perpendicular to the line of travel and can be used to feed stock through either the table saw or the shaper. And finally, this machine is equipped with a mobility kit. A mobility kit consists of a pair of wheels, one on either side, towards the back, closer to you, and this. This is commonly referred to as a Johnson bar, and as you can see, it's got a wheel as well. And I'll show you how this works. So I'm now standing at the back of the machine, and the first thing we need to do is to raise the jointer in-feed table to get it out of the way. So we can then insert the Johnson bar into a bracket on the back of the machine and pull to lift. The wheels are on a pivot, and they can be locked in place or allowed to freely pivot by tightening or loosening this handle. So at this point, you want to make sure that the wheel is down and in contact with the floor. And once it is, you lock it in place by tightening up the handle. And then do the same with the other side. You can then remove the Johnson bar from the rear bracket, and the machine should stay up in the air. If you're going to be moving the machine, you probably want to unplug it and disconnect the dust collection hoses. Now you can insert the Johnson bar into a bracket on the front of the machine and again pull to lift. The machine is now up on 3 wheels, and you can push, and you can pull, and you can even steer. The machine weighs about 1,400 pounds, so it does take a bit of effort to move it, but it can be done. Now I can clean up the sawdust that was under the machine. When you're done moving the machine, remove the Johnson bar from the front, reinstall it in the back, loosen the wheels, and then remove it from the back to return the machine to the floor. So, I think that will wrap up this introduction to the MiniMax CU300 Classic 2003 edition. As I mentioned, I plan on doing additional videos that will go over the individual woodworking features in more detail. So, and when I do that, we'll make some sawdust. So I hope you found this interesting, or at least useful, and thanks for watching.